the cover, but we're going for the 58.
Yes, exactly. So, oh, there we are. Oh God, we just got big. All right, so are we ready to go? We have everybody in, or roughly everybody in. So hello everybody, thanks for coming back to see us. We are broadcasting live from the Vineyard. It feels very funny to be here for some reason. You're gonna get punchy, Sarah.
It is kind of funny. It's all that we've been breathing carbon dioxide and we're in that
oxygen deprivation. So today's plan, we're going to give you a bit of a harvest update, and we're going to talk about leafstone Syrah.
Yep.
And talk a little bit, I think what we advertised we would talk about was kind of sustainability in the vineyard. And we'll touch on that and answer any questions people have. But since it's the middle of harvest, we thought we would mostly talk about harvest stuff. So, because that's kind of more fun.
Yep.
So, but since it's happy hour, I feel like often we get going on the vineyard piece and we forget the happy hour part. So let's allow people to start on the wine. So there's the leafstone. We are drinking up higher, this is there, leafstone 2017, which our camera's not focusing very well. Whatever, anyway. There you have it. Sorry. It's not wet.
Right?
So that's what we're drinking. You want to talk about
2017. It's a very interesting blend. 100% Syrah. Not something we do that often.
877.
Yeah, that's
got them
true.
383. So
yes,
you can talk about Syrah clones.
4 or 5 different Syrah clones in it, but let's start with 17. 17 was a really normal, summer, a little warmer than normal, but otherwise rain when we needed it, not too much when we didn't, and then it turned into just a glorious fall, glorious autumn, the kind we love. 7 to 8 weeks where I think it rained once, and other than that was just 75 and beautiful, and that's the kind of weather that people like in the fall, and it's also the kind of weather that grapevines that are trying to ripen their grapes like as well. So it was one of those nice years that so far 2020 has been kind of like that for us too. Is we're a little bit more relaxed because we get to decide when to pick based on how ripe things are rather than what weather is coming, or it's not quite right, but it's starting to fall apart. Yeah, exactly. This is just beautiful fruit and joy to pick and easy in the winery. So 17 is a pretty simple Syrah vintage for us. Syrah is it's the only red, I guess. Well, Pinot once in a while, but that we make really without blending. I was sort of joking in the beginning, but we don't feel like it blends very well with Merlot, Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc, Petit Verdot, the other reds that we have, the Bordeaux reds and Syrah. It's in our experience at Black Ankle. Once in a while, we put a little bit in.
Say with the exception of Pestegetta, which is a whole different ballgame.
That's a good point.
So yeah, which we could talk about separately, but yeah.
So we often have it on its own, which is lucky for us. Syrah makes a much more complete wine. Even when Merlot, we make some fabulous Merlots. They always could use a little more length, which they can get from Cabernet Sauvignon, or Cabernet Franc can use a little more elegance that it can get from, and Cabernet Sauvignon can use a little upfront and guts that it gets from the Merlot. The Syrah pretty much kind of does it all especially when the weather is good. So yeah, we're pretty happy with this one.
Yeah, and I made a quick allusion to it has 470 and 877 and 383. So we've talked about this some, I think, in some of the talks, but within even the varieties, there are different clones. So there are different kinds of Syrah, and we grow, I think, 5 different Syrah clones in any quantity, and they grow in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different places on the farm, and some like the hill, the one that's the most obvious is when you drive in the kind of isolated vineyard on your right-hand side, if you've come in the correct entrance, which I don't always do, but anyway, there are 2 different clones on that hill. And then, if you look far to your left as you're coming in, the far side past the electric light wires, there are 3 different kinds of Syrah planted over there. So when Ed says we don't blend, it's true that we don't usually blend any other kind of grape into the Syrahs, but we do often divide those up into different ways. So some years you'll see we have a leaf stone, we have a phyllite, we'll have a Syrah, we call Syrah, and those are all just different parts of the farm, or different clones, or different barrels, depending that we somehow, when we go to taste, we have decided taste better in different combinations, I guess. So there's a little blending that goes on, even though it ends up mostly 100% Syrah, but different pieces of Syrah.
Yeah.
So.
And Sarah makes a really good point, is that we grow lots of clones of Cabernet Franc and lots of clones of Cabernet Sauvignon and Chardonnay and all of those. The ones with the biggest difference by far are Syrah. The Syrah clones are so different, and you can taste it in the blind. If you handed us the grapes from the different clones, we could tell you which is clone 470 and which is clone 877.
Maybe that 470, yes, for sure.
470 is the one that's really the outlier here, and it was, when we planted it was supposed to be one of the highest quality clones you could plant. It turns out that it's one of the highest quantity clones you can plant. Huge bunches, huge grapes. But the wine is never very concentrated, and no matter what you do, you get wonderful elegance with it, but it's just a little lighter than the other ones. And the 383 right next to it, you just taste it much less. It's just not as juicy. It's more gutsy, and the 877 even more so. So
the skins fall apart more easily. You get a lot more subtlety in the juice and in the finished wines. They're really very different, yeah. And the bunches are smaller, which may or may not be related.
You can't really tell by looking at them so much. A little bit, the 470s are bigger, but we got them into the tank the other day, and I was going through doing the first pump over of them, and the 877 tank, I'm like, yeah, this is great. And then I immediately went to the 470 tank, and it was just lighter. It was lighter in color. It was lighter in body. I'm like, yep, this is the 470. It's going to be really good, but it's going to be really different. So yeah, we actually do some blending of that in that way, that we make different Syrahs because of that. And any of you who had the 15, in 2015, we made a leaf stone and a phyllite, and they were roughly, the 470 was the phyllite and the other clones were the leaf stone. It wasn't exact, but boy, were those really different wines. And I'm still not sure which one I like better, but they were really different. So
they're different, yeah.
Nice. So this wine, let's look at the back label for a minute.
So which clone is the 2017?
We're back to 17.
Do you remember which clones are in this blend? I'd have to look it up to remember for sure. I'm going to guess it's the 383 and the 877, because it usually is. Yeah.
And I think what we have left of 174 is in there too. We don't have much left of it. But one of the things that's on the back of this wine is it says 18 months in oak barrels. And this is the first year that we started omitting the word French oak from our barrels. Just a little trivia fact, because we started using some barrels where each barrel has about 15-20% of the staves from forests in Germany and Switzerland and Austria. Some combination of that. I think it's one forest that's on the border of all those. So yes, we decided we can't really say French oak barrels anymore, but we really love those barrels. They're really good. So yeah.
Depends. So the other show and tell, since we're at the farm, it was easy. Did I bring rocks once before? I feel like I did.
You probably.
So why is it called leaf stone? Oh, yeah,
why is it called leaf stone, Sarah?
Why is it called leaf stone? Funny, you should ask. Funny, I should ask myself. Rock. So this is a leaf stone. This is the rock. I'm going to try to zoom into the camera. And you want to talk about what's going on with the rock?
I don't know if you can see
I get my workout?
See these striations going horizontally here, right? So this is sedimentary rock. This was formed at the bottom of a ocean somewhere or something, and stuff fall down, and you get these striations. And then over time, it's become, I guess now it's considered metamorphic rock, because it was deep in the earth and it got squeezed and folded and lifted, and so much of it is now. Do your angle. There you go. So much of it at Black Ankle is like that, exactly like that.
It's gotten pushed up.
And as you can imagine, but it's kind of soft, and the water can go right down in through these cracks. It finds its way through the cracks. The roots can get into those cracks. There's no nutrient there. There's nothing, but it drains really well. but it doesn't provide much nutrient to the
Yeah, so it weighs
to
like
the vines.
400 pounds. Okay.
It weighs
Good
400.
enough. Whew.
Let me keep talking so Steph, so hold that thing.
Here's the one we were gonna show you. And then I was like, no,
I
we need a
suggested-
big one.
yeah.
So
Yeah, so here these little things can break off. You find some
Right.
rocks around here when you're here. These little guys break off, and you can this little one you can break with your hands. Well, I could break if I were stronger. There you go.
there you go. Yeah, I've just been holding the 50-pound rock.
Yeah, and so if we get out with a backhoe, a lot of the vineyard you get to rock, and you're like, wow, it's all rock there, but you could dig right through it. It's soft. So yeah.
Yeah,
so
there is a lot of mica in it, right? In leaf stone.
Yep.
Yeah.
There's a lot of mica in our.
So you can
phyllite.
sort of see how that was. I just missed to ask the question, but see how it's kind of sparkly. It is not a 9-carat diamond, unfortunately. You read about that? That was kind of cool. Did you read about that guy? Totally non sequitur. Never mind. I'm off topic. just ignore me.
So,
Somebody just found a 9-carat.
Sharon and Rick, yep, that's where crumbling rock comes
Yes.
from. That's
Yes.
where leaf stone, because
Right.
the technical term for this kind of rock is phyllite. That's
So you
what
see how
phyllite-
creative we are?
Yeah.
It's just the same name over and over and over.
Phyllite means is the Greek word for leaf stone. So if anybody knows the
Right.
Farsi word for leaf stone,
That'll be
we'll use
next.
that'll be the next
Exactly,
one.
Latin. I don't know.
Yeah, and
Anyway.
yeah. So the wine, it has some wonderful Syrah dark fruit aromas, like currenty kind of things, and then it's got a lot of that complexity, wacky kind of herby, a little bit of mushroomy almost. Like I love it, and it one of the things I like about this wine in particular, it's got really nice freshness. That's the French euphemism for acidity. It's got this wine's going to age really well because the acid is so nice in it, and it's going to preserve this wine for a long time and make it a really good food wine. So yeah, I'm really happy with this.
Great.
330 cases. Wow, that's good too.
I don't think there are very many left, but yes, that's true. So there was just a question about somebody. See, I got to see who's chatting because I'm missing that. They're just popping up and then I lose who it was. Okay, there's Skip. Hi. You had our segue into the 2020 harvest. Funny you should ask. So the 2020 harvest is looking like it's not over yet. And we always laugh that, like, we don't count our chickens before they hatch. Sometimes we don't even count our chickens once we have them because I always feel like something could go wrong. But we finished picking our Merlot today, which means we have picked all of the white grapes. We've picked the Pinot Noir, teeny tiny bit, but still we have it. The Syrah and the Merlot.
Malbec.
And the Malbec, right, which I always forget about but we do have it. And so far it's been fantastic. So yes, I'm gonna say yes. We have just 3 varieties left to pick. We have Cabernet Franc, Cabernet Sauvignon, and Petit Verdot left out here. We're standing in front of, this is Cab Sauv right here, we're sitting. And those tend to be pretty tough grapes in terms of resilient to like changes in weather, and they ripen a little bit later, but they also tend to kind of be a little less, I don't want to say we don't worry about them at all, but I worry about them a lot less. Merlot tends to be fragile, Syrah tends to be fragile, in that Pinot for sure, in that we're sometimes hoping that the grapes aren't going to kind of fall apart before we like the ripeness level. Whereas these generally are able to kind of roll through a fair amount of weather. And so far it looks like it's going to be a great year. Yes.
Yeah. Thicker skins.
Thicker skins, looser
looser bunches,
bunches, just a little less, I don't know, there may be other physiology going on that makes them a little less prone to late season rots. And I guess when I talk about falling apart, we often have kind of like certain molds and stuff that can come in that are just the grapes get susceptible to as you get really near ripening. So
the big difference so far from 2020 to 2019 is quantity. So 19 we had made some wonderful wines. We didn't make that much of them. We got low yields and everything. This year we are not only getting back up to normal and even a little above normal yields, but we have some of the new vines that we planted are starting to produce. So we're going to have, I hope, finally some more wine.
Yeah, we should have a little more.
Sarah and I have been playing tank Tetris down in the winery trying to figure out where everything's going to go. But I think we're going to make it. So,
It's true. It's true.
So So there's a question about from
Um,
Steve about having some GS. I've had some terrific GSM blends.
Me
Have you ever
too.
thought about doing something like
We've
that?
thought a lot about it. We've thought and thought. We just don't have the ingredients.
So GSM is Grenache Syrah Mourvedre, or the Spanish would say Matado. And yeah, we love those wines. We love Grenache and Mourvedre on their own also, but they blend well with Syrah. And since we love to blend so much, we really would love to have something to blend with our Syrah and see if we could make it even better. We're just a little nervous about the winter hardiness of those two varieties. I think we're going to try them. And in fact, maybe in 2 years, we're going to try plant a little bit and see if, you know, often the reputation doesn't quite fit. And we know Syrah is also supposed to be sort of winter tender. And we've had some issues with it, but we're doing okay with it. I would plant it again.
The worry when we talk about winter hardiness or winter tenderness, there are the different varieties of grapes have different tolerances for how cold they can get and still survive, and then also how susceptible they are to frost. And so for these, the big issue is that if we get a very cold winter, that we may just lose the plant entirely. And there's a whole spectrum in terms of what, you know, which grapes are kind of tougher and which are a little bit more sensitive. And then we also have different places on our farm that are cooler or warmer, which we've learned over time. So we are getting, I guess, a little gutsier as far as what we're trying. We started out mostly with varieties that we thought we were pretty confident could survive. Syrah was probably the most risky as far as what we planted in terms of winter hardiness or likelihood to survive a cold winter. I guess that's what we mean by winter hardiness. And in a few spots where we've pushed it, basically planted it too low on the hill, we've lost Syrah. In fact, this block we're sitting in front of used to be Syrah. For a very, very short time, it was Syrah until it all died. And now it's Cabernet Sauvignon, which is much tougher. So there you go, unfortunately. But we have learned which spots on this farm, and we're sitting at Black Ankle, can take Syrah. So now we're looking at the other farms and thinking if we can figure out where the kind of warmer spots are, maybe we'll take the next step and try Grenache, especially, and maybe Mourvedre, but really Grenache. That's really the one I miss the most being able to have. Yeah. So and someday we hope we'll be able to do it. Is there much difference in temperature and weather here versus the new vineyard?
Wow, it's a good question. We don't know about winter yet. Live edge should be a little warmer based on where it is, but it's a little lower as well. So it can get cold on those frosty nights. Reinhardt is the opposite. It should be colder where it is, but it's much higher. And so we're not exactly sure. And I'm not sure how to tell. We thought about putting weather stations up, but even then you can't really tell. You kind of need the vines there to decide, because
good weather stations. Yeah.
You know, it depends how they harden off. Do they harden off well? Do they come out and bud early? It's not just the temperature. There's all sorts of other things going on. And so
I'm going to back up and translate a little bit on
Sorry.
that. So, so there's just a few things, which you may know, having done tours and stuff here, but I feel like most of us think of, you know, climbing Everest, how the higher you get, the colder the air is. But at a smaller level, you know, heat rises and cold sinks. So unless you're talking about, altitudes where the air starts to get thinner, the lower spots are colder and the higher spots are warmer. So that's why I was talking about this spot here, which is we're sitting right next to the tasting room. It used to be Syrah because it's the very end of this hill. It's the lowest spot on this hill. And just when it's a cold night, the cold air has pulled down low. If you get a little higher, you're going to have a little bit warmer air. And if you see those giant green, they are fans, this giant green monster looking things in the fields, you can see when you're sitting at the tasting room, you can see one of them. Those are frost fans, and those help us to pull warm air down and change a little bit where the cold air sits to buy us a few degrees on a really cold night. So that's kind of what we're talking about as far as the difference in elevation versus temperature. And then it's also affected by how much water is in the soil, what the growing season has been like. So there's just a huge number of factors that go in. So just having you know, we can put up a little machine that will tell us what the temperature and the rainfall and the humidity has been. But there's so many factors that go in that what really works the best is to plant vines and then see which ones do well and in which spots. And then we're getting to learn. And that's why it's a slow process, but we've really gotten to learn here what works well. Oh, and then the last thing Ed talked about was hardening off. So that is, I don't think you can see that well on the vine behind me, but if you look at the shoots, if you look up close to a grapevine shoot, it's very green all summer, but by winter we want the actual stem parts. I'll go show you what I'm talking about to start to get brown.
Sarah's gonna go get brown.
I know it's see, wait, so here's the main thing. And then up here, all this should be brown, and it is really brown. I know you can't see on the camera, but you can probably tell at least which part of the vine I'm talking about. So as those get brown, that's just an indication that the plant has pulled the chlorophyll back in, and it's prepared for winter. And it's kind of like when a plant loses its leaves, it's the same thing as preparing for winter. So partly how we manage crop load, partly how we manage the growing season will indicate how well, and then partly just what the weather has been and the soils are like will help determine how the plant is prepared for winter. So a plant like this that's right now already, I can tell you, because I could see they're very brown on those stems. That means they're pretty ready for winter. So we hope it doesn't, because we'd still like them to do a little more work to ripen, but if it started to freeze even now, they would be fine, which is just, or they're on the trajectory to be in good shape. So that's, would you ever plant a variety?
Okay. If you ever plant a variety of varietals in a new area, like a bunch of things in a row, for instance, I mean,
we've debated that, and so far, no.
I think no.
So,
like, for instance, you could do it, but it's about a 10 or 15-year experiment is the problem. Like, we need to know over time. What we're talking about Syrah is because we've had it planted since 2003. We now know how it works. We would have told you something very different in 2009 than we would now, because we had 2013, because we had 2018 where we lost some vines. Where you have to go through some. We had Sarah talks about hardening off, and how the vines sort of, when they're ripening their fruit, they also ripen their wood. But there's other things that matter also. They can get very into a very deep sleep in the winter, and it's excellent, and they're ripened. Their wood is ripened off very nicely and hardened off, and you can get a very cold night in January, and the vines are fine. But then you can get a 3 55-degree days at the end of February in a row, and the vine starts to wake up, and then you get a cold night. It goes down to 0, and that same vine can lose all of its fruit, lose all its buds for the year, even lose some vines. And we've discovered, for instance, Syrah is susceptible to that. It wakes up early. It can have a nice, get nice and deep sleep in the winter, but it wakes up early. So we actually, the last time we lost a lot of Syrah was really a spring injury. It came, I think, March 2nd or something, that we lost some vines of Syrah. So,
and it's often when we have 2.
Yeah.
I find it's like often if we have 2, they can survive sort of one cold snap as long as it's not drastically below 0, crazy cold. But when you have a second one, it's like it's just too much. I don't know. I don't know if there's any scientific basis on that, but that's been our experience, that we've survived a bunch of winters where we've had a kind of one cold snap, but when there's a second cold snap, it's used up all its reserves to try to survive that or something like that.
And there's other things we've learned. I don't know if that's Syrah, but like Cabernet Sauvignon, for instance, is we've always thought of it as very winter hardy, because we've never lost a vine, or at least the first 10 years we were at Black Ankle. I think we never lost a vine. We planted in 2003 and some more in 2004. They were fabulous. And then in 2011, we planted a bunch more, and we lost a whole bunch of them that winter. And then every year we've tried to plant since then, we have lost a bunch of Cabernet Sauvignon, and we don't know, we couldn't figure out why. And we finally learned after all these years that it's very cold tender when it's young. And so we planted it in 03 and 04, and we just didn't have cold winters. So it survived. And once it gets big, it's pretty tough. And so now we know we had to be really careful with the Cab Sauv, and Sarah talked about it sort of hardening off, when the vine sort of goes in right around the beginning of August, switches from growing to ripening a fruit. It also switches from growing to ripening its wood for the winter. And Cabernet Sauvignon, when it's young, seems to just grow and grow and grow and grow until there's a frost. It almost puts almost no effort into it.
Fruit on it, if that would help.
Yeah, so that's an interesting idea.
I know.
We should maybe leave the fruit on it when it's young instead of cutting it off. There's something going on there. We don't know why, but we've found that as something to learn. So yeah, we we could plant a row of all these things, and it would take so long to learn. And you might have one vine that just dies from a virus, or I don't know, something in the soil is different, or just something was wrong with that vine. And then, it's difficult business to do experiments in, I guess.
There are researchers. I mean, there are the universities and the research stations where they do a lot of that, and they do a lot of testing and management, and it just takes a lot of attention, I think. And the other reason that we have shied away from that is we want to know when we plant something, not just if it will survive, but how the fruit is, and if the wine is any good. And so in order to do that, we need to have enough to be able to make it well, which is kind of crazy. So sort of the smallest experiment we ever have is about 1/2 acre, which is, 1,000 vines or something. And when we first planted Gruner Veltliner, when we first planted Albarino, even Malbec, we did plant, because they were kind of experimental. We did do sort of tiny quantities, but it's still, it has to be enough for where the way we work, I guess. It has to be enough that we can grow it, we can see how it survives, we can see how the wine is, and then if we like it, it's worth continuing. So that was a long answer. But there you go. I'll give the next one a short answer. The impact on a late heat wave once the vines start to harden off. Happily, that does not seem to make much of a difference. It's funny. In the winter, the hots and colds have a big impact, especially as the days get longer. I think it's a real combination of light and temperature that affects the vine. So because the days are getting, I know in the winter it seems to make a huge difference what the light's like. And I'm guessing that's maybe partly why now the trigger is partly temperature, but it's also partly just length of day. And so as hot as it is, the days are still short. And so the vines are still getting the message that it's time to go to sleep. So usually that's not a problem. The only potential, I guess, downside of a real heat wave now is that we just might see the sugars rise in the fruit that we haven't picked and we like to make wines that aren't super high in alcohol. So the higher the sugar is, the higher the potential alcohol is going to be, or the higher alcohol you'll end up with. So we want to pick the grapes while we like the ripeness level, but we don't have crazy sugars. But it can happen. It's happened before where we've had a couple of hot days and we've ended up with higher sugars, but we can usually kind of blend that with something that has lower sugar, and it works out pretty well. And Sam and Mary, so you're coming. Yay! Coming to Maryland. I'm reading right down the list. Have you ever thought of
someone named Melissa?
I was like, who's asking if we thought of making No. Have you ever thought of making a Syrah rosé? Yes, buddy, you should ask. So Syrah is one of the Syrah does make great rosé, and we are in the process of making a rosé that will have a lot of Syrah in it. It won't be 100% Syrah, but one of the things that we do, and I think we have talked about this before, is when we're in the winery, is as soon as the grapes get into the tank, we pull some juice off right away, and that's what we call bleed wine, and that is what we make rosé with for the most part. So we have this Syrah that we've bled off is becoming rosé as we speak. So yeah, that's it. Sparkling Syrah. That one has been done, not by us. There are some sparkling Syrahs out there. We are jumping into all kinds of new sparkling wines this year. We're working on lots of experiments, but that has not been
that's not one of them so far.
So far. So we did.
I haven't tried any. I
haven't had one. Yeah, I have had some sparkling red, but I feel like it was like a Tempranillo or something totally different. I don't know. But it's an interesting idea. So I wonder if we should do our little video.
Yep. First, I just want to say 2 different comments about drinking a 2012 right now. That's one of my favorite leaf dunk vintages.
I think it'll hang on for a while.
And they're saying it's drinking great. So that's wonderful. I haven't had it probably 3 or 4 years, but
but then it could use time.
I just love that one because it's very finesse driven and not super concentrated, but concentrated enough with nice and long and finesse. Like one of my favorites. So that's great. That makes me happy.
So I think we will get back to those other plants, Melissa, on when we plant, whatever, because we made a video today of what we were doing in the cellar. So I think if we've got our technology straight, we're going to disappear and our little video is going to show up. We'll see.
Hi, Bill and Debbie.
I know you guys got it on our screen. But there we go. Here we go. So let's see if this works. All right. So we're going to just talk through what's going on. I don't really know how long the video runs, so it's just going to play. But here we are picking by hand. Who is that picking? Oh, that's Miguel and Hal picking, right? Yep. Mickey, oh, it's on super slow-mo. Is it on super slow-mo, or do they slow it down so that we could talk a lot? I don't know. It's just slowed down. This is how fast we pick. You see why it takes a while? You know, they really are like super duper fast. I don't know how it's running slowly. But there's that. Then they go into the winery. So here are the bunch of the grapes. So we pick in these little tubs. We call them picking lugs. And this is what it looks like. Here's what the grapes look like when they go in. And this is all from this morning. So this is all Merlot that we sorted today. Yep, so there's the chiller. This is my videoing. And it's in a cold room. There's the chiller. Let's see why I'm not a videographer. And then next step is sorting. So we go bit by bit, and here are Evincio and Daniel. I think that's the back. And they just load box by box. And you can see on the bunches going up that little conveyor belt, you can kind of see at some point there's like a box of leaves. So we're very careful when we pick not to get a lot of other stuff into the bin, but if there's a leaf or a stick or something that's made its way in, they're tossing those off the sides as they go. No, there's no difference between the yellow and gray bins. They're just, we bought them at 2 different times. They are the same size. What is in the lugs in the video? And this is all Merlot. This is Merlot. Yeah, I think we picked 10 tons of Merlot yesterday, and another 5 today, something like that. Almost 10 today. Yeah, it was a lot. So then this is our destemmer and sorter. So this goes through, and the bunches are falling into the top of the hopper there, and then you can see the grapes fall out of the bottom, and then the stems go out the back. And they go into this little tank. We call this our satellite tank. So it just runs that's what the berries look like when they go in. So for the red wines, what goes into the tank is the whole berry. It's the skin. We get those are the stems off. But the skins and the juice and the pulp and the seeds and everything go into the tank. And then the stems we take back out and just throw back into the vineyard. Basically, they get composted back into the vineyard. So they can just add a little. We're supposed to be talking about sustainability. And that's in the sustainability conversation. Yes, there. I talked about sustainability. So one of the ways we add fertility back to the soil is to just not take it out in the first place. Not take it out in the first place. Just borrow it for a little while and then put it right back out there. Yeah. So here's again kind of just the sorting process. And that machine replaced. We used to have a sorting table with a destemmer in front, just a destemmer in front, and then 5, 6, 7 people standing along this table as a belt conveyor went by with the grapes on it, and we would pick out all the stems and all the things that got through the destemmer. This little orange machine from this company called Pelunk is it's a lifesaver. It's really good. That's our human sustainability angle. Yeah, because it is really a lot easier. Okay, then we're switching tanks. So then there's Daniel's putting the other tank back in. Luis Alberto's pulling this tank out. So they'll just start over, so then they can just keep running while we're going to load the other tank into this little one is going to go up. There's Christina filming from the other angle behind the scenes. So you'll see, so then this gets put onto the forklift, and then it's going to come around slowly. And then this little tank will be, and if you look up close to the bottom, you can just kind of see there's like a giant valve on the bottom of that little round tank. This is just showing them setting up the next tank again, and that has got a big steel plate on the bottom of it. So it's kind of hard to see in the picture here. And this is going to go back up over the tank, and then you'll see there's Luis Alberto with the yellow hose. So that's just a compressor hose, and this little tank is sealed with just a steel plate that's just held on with compressed air, basically. That's what the big silver tube sticking out of the side is. Yep. And so there go a ton of grapes lifted up in the air over the tank, and Luis, he's gonna climb up and put it on. Let's see how our video went. It's kind of a crazy process. I know. So then he goes up. Oops, don't take him on the top of the tank. There he is. Okay. So then we just connect the little compressor, and it's gonna open. You'll just be able to see. I hope if I filmed it well, but connects it, and then there's like a little steel plate. This is a little plate. It's going to open at the bottom of your screen there in that little blue tray. Oh, I just got out of focus, but anyway, it's going to open up, And then the grapes are going to fall into the tank. So there it comes. Oh, here it is sliding up. There they go into the tank. So that's it. So it's like a little rainfall of grapes going in.
One ton, almost 1 ton of grapes.
A ton at a time. Yeah, falling in. And it falls in, I mean, that thing, the plate slides open at half a second maybe, and they probably all fall from the tank and from the little tank into the big tank in 30 seconds maybe. I mean, it's kind of a crazy, like, just falling down. So that's kind of fun. And that's the basic how we get into the tank. So I don't know. That is oh, and then I think I zoom in so you can see what the grapes look like once they're in there. It looks like a black hole there, but it's not.
Don't fall in, Sarah.
I know. I'm like, don't drop the phone. Don't drop the phone. But it was really full, so I would have been okay if I had. There they are. So how many bunches does it take to make a ton? It depends ton on what variety it is.
It depends a ton.
There you go. So there you can see a little juices breaking loose in my last picture. But
maybe the average bunch is about 1/4 pound.
I'd say it depends. A Merlot bunch, yes. Yeah. A Syrah bunch is probably almost a pound. Most of these are heavy. So it just depends on the variety. A Viognier, I mean, an Albarino bunch is probably a tenth of a pound.
Yeah, right.
So it just depends a lot on what the different varieties are. Anyway, that's kind of like what was going on in the winery today.
Yeah.
So, and then what we use the stems for, the stems just go get put back into the vineyard, and they'll just go right back into the soil. They'll just decompose out there, and they just add fertility back to the soil. And then in the winter, after we prune, we mow everything. We have a chopping mower. So if anything hasn't disintegrated, it just gets kind of chopped up, and then it can go right back in. So yeah, that's kind of it. And then as far as timing, Syrah tends to be an early variety. It's usually, Pinot is super early, and then we pick all the whites, and then usually Syrah's next. So we often pick Syrah before, well, right after the whites. It's rare that we would pick it before any of the other whites.
We picked it 2 weeks ago, 10 days ago, 10 days ago. I think.
Yeah.
And all of our Syrah, and it's we've been down there while we're filling that Merlot tank. We have Syrah and other tanks that we've been pumping over the juice over the cap, and that's a long explanation. But we're working the wine, and they're looking really good. We're pretty pleased with them so far. Getting to see real wines come out.
That's great. There is a question about, are we worried about fungus or anything else in the stems contaminating the soil? No. If we had a real problem with an area, then we would be. But one of the things we try to do is just make sure that the vineyard is clean and healthy anyway. So I'm not worried about anything getting in that we didn't want there in the first place. Generally, it's what we want. So I'm trying to think if there's ever been a time that we're like, we don't want to put this back in. I mean, if we have diseased vines that have like a virus in them, then we dig them out and then we burn them. We don't chop those and put them back in, because there's certain viruses that can be contagious there are viruses that can be contagious. Sorry. Anyway, even in grapevines that can be dangerous, particularly in Syrah. And so those we will take away and we will just burn them. But generally the stems themselves, because we've been taking care of the vineyard the whole year, are pretty healthy. So they're fine. Yeah.
There's a question about those tanks. Yeah, those are sheet stainless steel, and I guess they're made custom for us. You order what size you want, but they can make any size. They just basically every tank is made they're kind of all custom, but all kind of the same. And are the frost fans solar? I wish they were. That would be great, right. But no, they use a tremendous amount of power for about 6 or 8 hours once every 4 years. So it's sort of the worst thing in the world for solar, which likes to create a little bit of power along the way.
Right.
So they can't even really be electric. What we do is we hook the tractors up to them, and they run off tractor power. So, they need something with a lot of oomph to run them. So,
all of a sudden,
great.
Let's see.
Wow, that's a really good question, Steve. Do some plants interact with the environment in a way that skews the environment in their favor? Do grapevines act like that? Are they competitive or agnostic to adjacent vines? Or I guess the other thing is, could they be sharing among the vines, which happens in forests apparently, and trees and things?
Right.
The answer is we don't really know.
We don't really know. Right. We don't know the details of it. I will say that one of the reasons that our vines are planted so close together is it does tend to make they do tend to be competitive enough that they push their roots deeper and deeper. So I think there is some level of competition that you see between vines, so that they, when you have vines that are planted compactly close together, which is what we've done, their roots tend to go deeper, and then that is good for a lot of reasons. That's good for, they become less susceptible to swings in water. So the amount of rain that we have has less of an impact on the vines because they're down low. If you have vines that are very far spaced and really have lots of room to grow, they'll grow like big wide canopies of roots, and then they will tend to just like drink whatever water comes, and then they'll also get a less interesting mix of nutrients and we think flavors. There's kind of controversy in the wine world of whether the soil that you have vines in, like whether there's a direct connection between the soil and the flavors that you get in the wine. But the fact is, if you plant things in different soils, you get different flavors. So there's some connection. We just don't quite have it mapped out how it works. I guess we being chemists, we certainly don't. But yeah, the understanding, I guess, is not totally there yet. So
yeah, and at the same time that they sort of compete with their roots for nutrients or things, there's also some research saying that if some disease, let's call powdery mildew or something, gets in one small part of the vineyard, those vines will send up some message somehow that the other vines in the rest of the vineyard start activating their defenses against it. So there is some cooperation going on as well. It's really hard to measure that stuff, so I don't know. But,
right, it's hard to know.
Indications are that it's some mix of all these things.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting.
So there, I think we're getting hints that we should be talking about sustainability. So that was the main topic. We knew we would talk a lot about Syrah because Syrah is fun. But as far as practices that we have here, and I think if you can see this, the vines, we were laughing. We're like, oh, we couldn't have weeded the vines that we're looking at. So number one, so we do try to make a real effort to be, I guess it's sustainable. I don't know what the right word is. In the vineyard, is it to just kind of be very conscious, I guess, about what we're doing in the vineyard in terms of caring for the vines, caring for the soil. We spent a whole happy hour a couple of months ago, I think, talking about just soil and all the things we do for the soil, but that carries over into the plants as well. And a lot of it starts with trying to figure out a good place for vines to grow in the first place, so that they're in soils where they have the best chance of doing well. They're not going to be growing so enormous that they need a ton of, they're going to shade each other or need a ton of inputs. We do all of our weed management, and that's why I'm laughing at how, luckily you can't see, they just look like beautiful vines from here. But if you look up close, there are tons of weeds under those plants. I could I better not zoom the camera, we'll be in trouble, but maybe I can zoom the camera. Let's see, dun, da, da, da. Can you see without how well you can see the vines? Oh, this is kind of cool. It's like Jaws. Anyway, I'm just spilling my wine. Never mind. All right. So there are lots of weeds, and that's because most vineyards would say you'd walk in and you'd see a huge brown patch under the vines and a bunch of dead plants. And that's because they just spray herbicide. It's so easy to do that. It would be kind of lovely. But you're basically spraying plant killer in the middle of your forest. So that just feels like a bad idea. So we do all of our weeding. We have tractors that do it, and then we do the rest of it by hand. So we often, if you see a long brown strip under our vineyard, it's because our crew's been there with a hoe and pulled it out by hand. So usually we have machines that can do it almost well enough, and then usually we'll have to go through kind of once a year and clean up a little bit. Yeah. So
and late in the year, especially in a year like this where we started getting some more rain later, we often let the weeds grow up because we want the weeds to compete for that water. We don't want that water going to the vines. So the more competition we have, we don't really like morning glory and things that climb up the vines, but a little grass is fine and a lot of other things are fine. So we've learned to love the unkempt look a little bit because we think it helps make better. Sorry. So
in the vineyard, that too.
Makes better wine. And and Sarah talked about the weed killer aspect. You spray something like Roundup or one of the herbicides. They kill plants, and much of the life in the soil is plant life. It's micro plant life, but it's plant life, and it's killed by that. And the soil, we are try to be so careful with our soil, because you need a fluffy, nice soil that can let air go in and water go through and provide what it needs for the plants and all of that stuff. And you start messing with that environment and it affects your wine. No matter what you think about sustainability in a larger sense, we think it makes the wine worse to do that kind of thing. It's easier. There's no question about it. It's easier. But
if you kind of kill what's there, you end up with a much simpler microbiome. The things that come back, you get less variety in what comes back in terms of species. It just takes longer for all the interesting things to repopulate. So you're just going to end up with kind of a less interesting plant, I think.
The second thing you'll see, I think, or one of the other things you'll see out here is tractors with treads on them, or tracks, instead of wheels. We have some wheeled tractors, especially the small ones. And then we have a couple of bigger ones that we use when it's dry. But if it's wet at all, and most of the time, if you're using anything heavy, we are using the tractors with tracks. And that's because of something called compaction. And these rows are 7 feet wide, and we're running tractors down them. We are going on the exact same tracks over and over again throughout the year. It might be 8 or 10 times down each row with the tractor and the tracks. So all that weight pushing on the soil compacts things, and all the tires slipping on them basically grind the soil up. And when you grind it up into smaller pieces, it can compact more. And over time, you get these very compact soils. And what that means is the air has a hard time entering that soil. So water will sit there longer on a compact soil. It'll eventually soak in, but it won't drain, because nature doesn't like a vacuum. And so when it's sitting there, it can only drain if air can come in. If air can only come in slowly, the water won't drain. And that's exactly the environment we don't want for our grapevines. So we're getting more and more extreme in our fight against compaction. I think tractors that
as we learn more and we get better tractors. And then another aspect of sustainability is really, I would say, really the amount of kind of hand work we do on the vine. So a vine wants to grow like a big jungle. It wants to have tons of leaves everywhere. It wants to have layers on top of itself. And if you do that, you're going to end up with a very kind of moist, humid environment inside where the grapes are, which is great to grow funguses and things that we don't want. So you can beat that by using certain kinds of chemicals. So you can basically let your vineyard run wild, and then you can spray certain things, and they tend to be things that are a little more kind of harshly chemical. So, and they tend to be things that work throughout the plant rather than kind of land on the surface of the plant. And that will save you a lot of work, and it will make your fruit, it'll protect your fruit. But again, it's like kind of harsh on the plants. And so one of the things that we do is make sure that our fruit is really well exposed, because the sun and the wind will do 75% of that job for you if they can see the grapes. It takes a lot of work to get the grapes exposed to the sun and the wind, in terms of organizing the way the shoots go, in terms of pulling leaves off around the clusters, in terms of kind of making the canopy really kind of flat, and then making the fruit really well exposed to sun and wind. So that's one of the things, one of the reasons that we have such a big vineyard crew, one of the reasons we do so much work on the physically touching the vines, is because it lets the sun and the wind do a lot of the work for us. And then we do have to do some spraying. There are some chemicals we have to use, but that allows us to use things like sulfur and copper and phosphorus acid, more gentle things that are more gentle, basically, on the environment, on the plant, on us. So it just works better, and we think it makes the wines better. Also, it's a little bit of everything.
Yeah, we on the spray question, we tried being organic. 2005, we lost about 60% of the crop to a disease called black rot, and so we're not there. We're pretty close. We're organic on the floor. We have to use a few chemical sprays a year. We try to use copper and sulfur, which are organic sprays, phosphorus acid, which is not, but is in many ways even softer than those. And then we have to put in a few other sprays for specifically black rot, and once in a while the darn Japanese beetles, which will eat the entire vineyard, every leaf in the vineyard if they go nuts. So we're not quite there, but we're pretty close, and I guess mostly happy with it.
So 2 questions. One was about planting anything specific between the rows. And we did try it for a while in the early days. We did try to, and then we found that weeds were growing in, and we were fighting that, and we were figuring out, and then we went to France. I remember I went to France on one of my winemaking studious trips that I did when I was learning how to make wine. And I was talking to the vineyard manager there, and they were like, oh no, what was the word they used? Something, it was like the spontaneous. They were like, the spontaneous plants are what you need. That's just what the soil wants. And I was like, oh, awesome! It seemed like such a gift. They're like, just let whatever grows, and don't call it weeds. Call it spontaneous generation of what you're looking for. So that's what we've done ever since. So no, we have not. What we do, and it is kind of true. I mean, it was sort of funny the way they said it. It was very freeing to hear, like, no, the right weeds are going to grow in, and that's fine. But if you have kind of a healthy, balanced environment, you will find that the weeds that come in are going to be actually pretty good. So there are lots of experiments out there with people trying to grow things that won't need to be weeded, like fescues and things, or like sedums or something almost under the vines, but we've never gone that route. And then we
just asked for volunteers.
Yeah, the volunteers come, I'll grow, right. And we do end up with an interesting mix. And again, because one of the nice things about being able to grow a vineyard is that sort of one of the worst things you can do in farming or for the environment is to try to grow a monoculture, try to have all one thing, right? So on one level, we are a huge monoculture. We have acres and acres and acres of just grapevines. But because we can let the understory grow, we actually have this very, very diverse plant system going on down there. So we end up with a much more kind of healthy environment, despite the fact that we are growing this one crop on a lot of it. So it's kind of a nice thing versus if you're growing corn or wheat, you don't have that luxury. It is kind of a luxury with what we're growing. And then there's a question
about using farm animals to control weeds, like in New Zealand, or will they eat the vines? The answer is they will eat the vines.
Yeah.
We had chickens that we put in the vines for a while, and they of course would run over and eat the grapes.
They can fly a little.
They can fly.
Just enough to eat a grape.
Most of those stories you read are places like California or something where they're actually growing grapes during not really their winter, but during their off season. So in those environments in California, in Northern California, it's dry all summer, so nothing pretty much grows, and then it rains in the winter, and everything grows in the winter. So their seasons kind of flip from us, but they grow the vines in their summer by irrigating them. So they don't have much weed control during the year because it's just sunny and it doesn't rain much. So the weeds don't grow, and then in the winter, after the grapes are picked, the weeds grow, everything grows, and you can let the sheep and geese and all sorts of stuff in there to weed, which is lots of fun. But we don't have any problems in the winter.
Yeah. So sheep will eat what's green. They won't eat the bark of the plant. So if the plant is dormant and the leaves are off, they're not going to hurt the vine, but they'll eat the grass and stuff. And in California or in Australia or New Zealand, a lot of places where you get rain in the winter, but it's not frozen, they can eat the understory, and then it's pretty well cropped. It's pretty well clipped when summer comes, and then it's droughty and not much grows. So we don't have that because when we could let the sheep in, there's nothing for them to eat. But it would be really cool. And the places that do it, there are places that do it, but they put these little harnesses on the sheep so they can't lift their heads. Yeah. And it just seems mean. People say it's not, but it just seems cruel to the sheep. So I can't go there, so we haven't. Yeah. Oh, the spotted lanternfly. Yes, they're horrible, horrible, horrible for vineyards. We're hoping we won't get them. But they're coming. They're creeping closer.
Yeah, they're pretty bad. But
we'll see. We've had.
It's another Asian insect that came to Pennsylvania 6, 7, 8 years ago, I think, and is now spreading, and it loves vineyards and hoplands and orchards and things. And it kills grapevines, and it leaves it hurts fruit, and it doesn't. They're pretty mess. So we're hoping they're trying to contain it in Pennsylvania. Mm-hmm. It's leaking out there's some in Hagerstown they found. There's some in Hartford County, I think they found some. So it's getting to Maryland, but slowly. Yeah,
it's a worry. It is a worry. I will say that not that I'm at all old, but I'm old enough now. I've vineyarded enough that we have lived through about 5 different horrible invasive pests that we thought would destroy us. And so far, famous last words. Yeah. So far they haven't. Japanese beetles were terrible, the marmorated stink bug, the Asian lady beetle. Like there've been a lot and each of them has their own glitch, and they're not without worries. Japanese beetles are certainly one that we've had to deal with. So it's not that we have no concern about it, but it's also, it seems like over time they tend to settle out. There's some damage along the way. I mean, often there's some heartache along the way, so it's not without worry, but I guess we're optimistic that we'll be okay.
Yeah. So Sharon, Rick, are there insects that have a positive impact on the vines? Absolutely.
Yes,
yeah.
yes. Most insects are our friends.
Now,
yeah.
grapevines are self-pollinating, so we don't need bees or anything like that. But what there are is a whole environment of insects out there that are hunting and parasitizing each other, and there's this huge thing going on. And so if you get to that elusive point of balance, you get a little bit of damage from this, but not much, because the predators come along and kill it, or the parasites come along and reduce the population. We get problems when we have something like Japanese beetle, which is introduced from somewhere else and doesn't have any natural predators, and birds don't really eat it, and it just goes nuts. And so but the problem is then the only thing you do is you have to go through and spray for it, and then when you spray for it, you kill a whole bunch of other insects. And when you kill a bunch of other things, what happens, the good things, in our sense, the good things, the things that
eat other insects.
They eat other insects.
Yeah.
They don't come back first because they have nothing to eat. So the things that eat your vines come back first.
Because the vines are still there to eat.
Because the vines are still there to eat. And then slowly the predator things build. But by then you have to spray for the bad things, so you throw yourself out of balance by spraying. And that's one of my biggest worries about the spotted lanternfly, is if it gets here and the only option seems to be, you have to go out and spray for it. Now you're ruining the balance of everything else, and yuck.
You run into other problems. Yeah. So for the most part, we do not do anything to kill insects. There are some times that we do need to. The Japanese beetle is a definite one.
Yeah. Great berry moth this year.
Great berry moth is one. It's a very specific, that doesn't kill a lot of other stuff because it's a bacteria that just goes in. It mostly affects them. But there are a few times that we need to, but for all those reasons that I just said, we like insects. Right. We're running tight. We're getting up to are there insects that Oh, milky spore for beater gloves. We've tried it. It's a great idea, but it doesn't work very well, I think, in a massive scale. I think because you need to put a ton of milky spore. So there's this stuff called milky spore, which you can put on the ground and it kills the beetle grubs. It's a bacteria. But you have to use a tremendous amount of it, and it doesn't last from year to year. So we did not have luck with it. We did try it here. I think like in a garden scale or something, you can do it. It can be very effective.
But it's very effective if you want to protect turf, because it will keep them from spreading and eating your grass and things. Here, the Japanese beetle can fly 5, 6, 7, 8 miles, and they love grapevines. And when they find something they like, they send off a pheromone that floats, and other Japanese beetles everywhere around smell it and come. So we don't get many from our place. We really don't. We see where they're coming from. We see that they're not dirty when they're on the vines. And we can see that the vines on the north side of the farm always get eaten first. They're flying in from miles away. So the milky spore doesn't really help us from the problem that we have, unfortunately.
And there are sprays that are more eco-friendly, and we do try to use the ones that are the most gentle. That will work. So it's not that anytime we have to spray for bugs, it's something horrible, but it is, the sprays that work well on this spotted lanternfly are pretty grim. We'll have to see what happens, but yes, there are. So there's a whole range, like with many things, there's a whole spectrum, and we try to use as few as we can, with as wide of intervals as we can, and then see how it goes. And Japanese beetles, most years we don't spray for them at all. And we will tolerate a large number of Japanese beetles before we deal with them. But when they get to the point where they're going to kill vines, then we feel like we have to do it. So we can take a little damage and it's fine. And that's, that's part of the deal. But we try to let it go as far as we feel like we can before we're going to really struggle. Oh my God, it's so pretty out there.
It's so beautiful. Oh, wish you could see the
spin
sunset.
The camera. Look at the sunset. Hold on. Look at can you see how beautiful it is over there? Oh my God, it's gorgeous. Anyway,
that's just a reflection.
Much prettier than us. Anyway, sorry. There we are.
Beautiful sun on the the question is, are there any sprays that are eco-friendly? Yeah, there are quite a few, and we use quite a few of them. There are some times where they just don't work very much. On the Japanese beetles, for instance, there are some quote unquote natural insecticides. There's one that's an extract from chrysanthemums, for instance. It doesn't work on Japanese beetles because of the hard shells, and it does kill pretty much everything else. So it's kind of interesting. Yeah, it's natural, it's extracted from a plant, but it pretty much wipes out every insect out there.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure I'd call that eco-friendly. It's
I mean, sometimes I would say arsenic is natural. Like there are lots of natural things that are really bad for you too.
There was a question about the cicadas coming next summer, and the 2004, so 2021, the next year. We had planted 22 acres in 2004 when they came the first time, and no big deal. Not here.
So it turns out that the cicadas, they are very plentiful, mostly in kind of suburban neighborhoods. What they like is shrubbery. I don't know, shrubbery is a funny word. Sorry, shrubbery. So they kind of nest in the roots. We'll see. We'll have to see what happens this time, but they tend to nest in roots. So in land that's really been farmed, because of all the cultivation of the soil, they actually are not a great host for these long-term locusts. And we were very nervous because we planted a vineyard in 2003 and then in 2004, and we thought, oh my gosh, we're gonna have thousands of these, they're gonna eat all the leaves. And we had in our neighborhood in Silver Spring thousands of them, and here I bet we saw 10. I mean, it was weirdly few that were here. So we'll have to see what happens next year, but it's not bring us a shrubbery. Exactly.
I'm a little worried.
I'm not too worried about them.
I'm a little more worried about live edge.
Yeah, because it's near a lot more shrubbery, because it's kind of in the suburbs.
It's down nearer to where the core of these things are, but it should be fine. It should be fine.
And Jack, you were talking about the beetles. I think again, with a lot of these pests, there's a huge boom of them, and then they just do tend to simmer down. So I think even in the years that we've grown, which is now we're up to almost 17, 18 years of growing, the beetles are still cyclical, but the cycles seem to be a lot more spread out and smaller in terms of the level of damage. So
I hope something is
figuring out it can eat them. That's usually what happens is you get one of these pests and nobody recognizes it, so nobody eats it, and then some brave bird or something tries, and then they start, and then it kind of tends to settle back down. So nature's pretty impressive on how it can eventually. I mean, gypsy moths, again, we're decimating. I remember them from when I was a kid, and you see a few, but they're not. Yeah. We thought they're not going to. I remember learning there were going to be no trees left in New England. It was all going to be gone, and it looked like it, and then now they're fine. So, that's our hope, is that some of these things will settle back out. Yeah.
Great. Just very quickly, Al, we had talked about some unknown grapes. We had a couple of spots in the vineyard. We had 15 vines that we're not sure what they were. So we sent off the DNA analysis out to California Davis to the lab, and and it turns out it's a variety called Isabella, which is I'd never heard of before, and is a hybrid. I think it's a hybrid or even a native. I'm not even sure. Yeah. Interesting variety. And
it was not Mourvedre or Grenache or anything I hoped it was going to be. We did make 2 5-gallon buckets of it, and it was terrible, but that's probably the terrible winemaking, because you really can't make good wine in a 5-gallon bucket. Anyway.
It really wasn't very good, unfortunately.
We only had a few vines, so we did our best, but there we go. Oh my God, ice wine. Well, we'd have to have a serious ice age to be able to do that, but who knows? Yeah. All right, so we're running out of time. I'm on to logistics. That's always my job.
Your job.
Some quick logistics. Okay, so thank you for joining us. The next happy hour is we're going to stick with the first Thursdays at 5:30. So that's November 5th. And we are going to talk about, the plan, I think, is to talk about sort of the buildings here. We're going to talk about whatever we feel like. Let's just call it what it is. Whatever you like to know. But the plan is to talk a little bit about.
As long as it's what we want to talk about, we're going to talk about it.
See, it's like the construction and the buildings and the living rooms and how we did it all. I don't know. That was kind of the thought, is some of the backstory of all these buildings. But again, what we really love to do is sit and answer questions. So whatever comes up is fine. I think we're going to pick a featured wine, and we're talking about white wines for that, but maybe we'll talk about maybe we'll try to drink some wines that would be good for Thanksgiving, because I think that was going to be another plan, to talk about what to drink with your Thanksgiving. And then we have second Saturday coming up, not this coming Saturday, but the week after. And We've got Dave Weber playing and Trippy Tacos. And we had Trippy Tacos here a few weeks ago.
Good.
It was really good. I thought it was really good. So I can recommend having actually each of them. For second Saturdays, we don't do, I mean, we have, you need a reservation, but I think we don't make them publicly available. So you have to actually email us to get your reservation, because that's how we keep out the hoi polloi. That's because it's supposed to be for club members. So you have to email us and tell us you want a reservation, and then we make your reservation to everyone. So you can email info, you can email your wine club rep if you know who that is. You can email any of us and we will set you up if you'd like to come on Saturday, October 10th for second Saturday. And then we're working up, we can't really quite do normal wine dinners yet, but we have been working on a kind of picnic style wine dinner, which we're calling it picnic style because we're going to give it to you in a box and you're going to eat it on your own. But really, we went, Christina and Zoe and I had the arduous task of doing the tasting on Tuesday. It was a really tough duty. And it's really going to be like one of our wine dinners. It was really good. And it was very interesting, kind of a different mix. So because we're not in the like, I don't, we don't, in the COVID world, we feel like we don't want to be coming like pouring in your glass and doing a whole lot of, we're trying to be minimal on interactions. The idea of this picnic wine dinner is that it was designed to pair with Leafstone, but just for fun, we also tasted all with the Crumbling Rock 17, and really it was pretty good with both. I would say more of the courses we liked better with Leafstone, but there were some debate. So I think you could really choose either one of those wines. And then it's 3 different courses, but all of them pair with that wine. So it's kind of a new twist, and it really made the wine taste very different in each course. So that's kind of fun. And the idea is, I think he can only cook for a fairly small number of people. So maybe 60 people total, and you can come and eat it here, or you could take it home as you prefer, but that's kind of the plan. I think I've covered all that. Zoe, text me fast if I blew it on anything.
We're the next happy hour, November 2, we're going to talk about the Black Ankle Estate 2016.
Oh, we are. Who
Yes,
knew?
we are.
Who knew? Oh, the date. The Leafstone picnic dinner is on October 25th at 5 o'clock. And we are still waiting on some details from the chef about, so we don't have prices or all the details yet, but we do have the menu, which was really good. We're trying to figure out some of the packaging and blah, blah, blah.
Sarah approved.
I approved, yeah. It's not even 3 chocolates for dessert.
Oh, no. How many desserts is it?
There's one dessert, but it has a lot of parts. It's pretty cool.
Okay.
It's pretty cool. So
No.
I think we've covered the logistics. Oh, there you go. We're doing it to celebrate Melissa's dad's birthday. There you go. So awesome. So I think, oh, you could eat, oh, sorry. Yes, I forgot. I did forget something, which is if you're interested in the dinner, I think this may sell out fast. So even though we don't have the last details in terms of prices and stuff, if you think you might be interested, you can send Zoe a note. She'll hold a spot for you, and then you can always bail out if it doesn't work out for you. But that will secure your place if you do want to do it. So there you go. Oh yeah, so happy birthday. So we're having this whole party for Tom Schulte. That's it. October 25th. And we're gonna do the pickups, I think, at 5 and 5:30 that evening. So and then I guess the last, are we done with it? We're kind of late. Well, anyway, we have the next happy hour. We are working on a plan for winter. I will just say we are working on a plan. It's going to involve being outdoors because that's what makes us comfortable, and we feel like it's making everybody else comfortable. So I do have a whole lot of fire pits coming, blankets, fire pits. We're going to come out with a way that you can come freeze yourself out here for a little while, but make it all winter. So our plan is to stay open, and you'll be able to make a reservation. You'll have your own private fire, and you can sit out maybe for like an hour before you're too cold, and then you can go home. So we'll see. So those details are all in the works. So we haven't forgotten that winter is coming. For all of you Game of Thrones, which I never read, but I know winter is coming. So I think we better cut us off because we're way over time. So thank you everybody for coming out. Wine helps. The wine does help. All right. Have a good night. Bye.
Bye-bye.